you're like me, you spend lots of time poring over maps, looking at weather data, all in an effort to help predict when and where my best times to hunt will be. It'd be nice if there was a reliable source with all this information in one place. Enter the Spartan Forge app. Unlike some other predictive apps on the market, Spartan Forge was created from military combat intelligence experience tailored for hunters, and stands at the nexus of machine learning and white-tailed deer hunting. No more man-made algorithms. This is a predictive model based on real GPS collared deer data, historical and predictive weather, and the next level of mapping imagery, all at my fingertips. I've been using the iOS app this season, and it has replaced all my other mapping tools. Visit SpartanForge.ai and sign up today, or head to your iOS or Android app store. Use the promo code TRUTH to save some money and download it today. Mobile hunters, if you're interested in upping your mobile game, then head to tetherednation.com and check out their saddle gear. There are a few things you can actually buy that will help you become a better deer hunter or give you the freedom to hunt any tree or any situation. This is the reason why I started saddle hunting in the first place and why I use Tethered's gear. I can honestly say that Tethered's saddle gear has changed how I hunt for the better. Big tree, little tree, from the ground, it doesn't matter. I'm untethered by my gear to hunt the best setup for the situation, instead of hunting for a tree that my gear can use. My current core setup consists of the Phantom saddle, tethered one sticks, and the Predator platform, along with an assortment of their accessories. So if you want to up your mobile game, head over to tetherednation.com. Welcome to the Truth from Stand Deer Hunting Podcast, brought to you by Spartan Forge. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you're listening to episode number 319. Today I'm joined by my buddy Dan Johnson to talk about out-of-state hunts and hunting a new property. So stay tuned. All right. What is up, everyone? Happy Wednesday to you. Hope you are doing well. Hope you are feeling fine. I am feeling exceptionally refreshed here. I just got back from the annual weekend that I take my wife on, a little, post-holiday craziness kind of getaway that we do every year to a place that we like to go to where we just kind of lounge around in bathrobes, hang out in a hot tub, eat good food, order room service. On this particular trip, I ran into the rare bottle of Pappy Van Winkle that I was able to partake of. So I was pretty stoked about that. But all in all, awesome weekend. This past weekend marked the end of the Pennsylvania statewide kind of late season, if you will. There's still some special reg units open, around me and so forth. But by and large, the season has kind of come to an end. And so I have fingers crossed that we don't get crazy cold weather and snow and stuff, because right now the place that I would really like to get to do some scouting is open for business, as they say. So I'm kind of chomping at the bit to check some of that stuff out. And this is really kind of the time of year where it's like I start to, I guess, flip the switch a little bit and start thinking about next year. I do like to take a little bit of time off, but this year, for whatever reason, I'm really kind of chomping at the bit to actually load up the trailer, throw the dog in the trailer, and not literally throw him, but load him into the trailer and head to the North Piece and start doing some scouting. I know a lot of folks will wait a lot of times for at least the antlers to drop, so to speak, so you're not pushing deer out. And hopefully if you know where they're at, they might still be in those kind of sanctuaries, if you will, post gun season, places that they might be hanging out, especially if it's cold, if you're on south facing slopes or whatever the case is, and not wanting to run them out of those places because you're hoping to pick up antlers. I deprioritize antlers for me, and I prioritize just getting in, especially on this North Piece where there's often a lot of snow cover. I prioritize just getting in when I can still see the bare ground. And so if that holds up here for the next 2 weeks, probably not next weekend because I have some stuff, some obligations that I need to take care of. But the weekend after that, I think if the weather's right, I'm probably going to make a trip up and at least while the ground's still bare, and see what I can learn from this past season. But speaking of learning from this past season, got some really cool stuff to pass along to you guys. Our buddies over at Exodus, you guys know them, you love them. They've been a partner of the show for a long time. I've had word on this for a little while, and I've managed to keep it under wraps. Haven't said anything to anybody, but they are actually going to be introducing, as of this past Monday, if you're listening to this on Wednesday, introducing the new Exodus Rival. What the Rival is they've been hard at work kind of building out their next line of trail cameras. And what the Rival is actually a budget-friendly cell camera that's as reliable as you've come to expect from their regular, the Lift 2 and the Render. So it's as reliable, as hardworking, and just as easy to use as any of their previous cameras. And it has a lot of the same features that you kind of have grown to love over the past several 6-7 years if you've been using any of their previous cameras. But over the past year, like I mentioned, they've been kind of hard at work behind the scenes developing this camera, their next generation of cameras. And the one thing that they always do is take consumer feedback. So whether you're talking to them at a Harrisburg show or you're sending them an email or whatever the case is, they're listening to the people who's actually using these in the field, listening to your opinion and what you're looking for. And that's kind of how the Rival came to be. It's the best budget cell camera on the market. So it's a budget friendly cell camera, and it's coming in at a price point at $179. And if you know anything about the Exodus trail cameras, they just flat out work. And it's, of course, backed by the Exodus Advantage, the 5-year no BS warranty that you've grown accustomed to. So just to kind of drop a couple of the specs, you should tune in. They'll have a bunch of information on their website, and if you're coming to the Harrisburg show, stop in and talk to them there and ask all the questions that you want to get answered. But just to kind of drop a little bit of the knowledge or a little bit of the specs for you here, it's 0.3 second trigger speed, 70-foot detection distance with adjustable sensitivity, 30-second photo transmission, adjustable image quality on upload of photos, crisp HD images, compatible with their Exodus SP18 solar panel, which I use on all my cell cameras. And then once again, not to harp on it, but again, backed by their 5-year no BS warranty. So the Exodus Rival is officially opening for pre-sale on January 16th. So this past Monday, they opened for pre-sale. I think that started around 7:30. So if you're listening to this on Wednesday, you can go ahead over to the website at ExodusOutdoorGear.com and pre-order this cell camera. And if you do that, use the code LAUNCH, and that will save you $30 off on each camera. And in doing so, that actually will just be while supplies last, because I believe they're closing everything down for the pre-sale on February 14th at midnight. So head over to ExodusOutdoorGear.com, use the promo code LAUNCH, LAUNCH, save yourself $30, and it'll also help support some of the folks who help support this podcast. So with that, we're going to go ahead and jump into today's show. Today I have on my good buddy, Dan Johnson. You know him, you love him, Mr. Nine Fingers himself. It's always good to kind of catch up with Dan. It seems now we catch up like preseason, kind of see what's going on with each other, and then we catch up postseason to see how everything went. And in true Nine Finger fashion, he always has some crazy stories and some crazy things that happen to him while he's in the timber. And it's and this session holds true as well. He killed a killer buck in Iowa that we talk about, and then he had some other kind of weird wonky hunts when he was out west that we kind of dive into as well. We do a little wrestling talk or a little grappling talk because his kids are wrestling now, which is awesome because I'm a big fan of grappling, so we talk a little bit about that. But overall, just a killer session with Dan. Always great having him on. Hope you guys dig the conversation as much as I did, and as always, thank you all for listening. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. And today I have on my brother from another mother, Mr. Dan Mother Freaking Nine Fingered Johnson. What's going on, dude?
Not too much, man. You sounded like you were mad at a kid the way you introduced me. You didn't say the swear word, but you said, you got close.
Right. Yeah. It's trying to keep it clean for the kids, man. You know what I mean?
There you go.
You gotta, if you're gonna drop those, you gotta do the old earmuffs. Earmuff alert for anyone driving and listening.
Yep.
That way, I sometimes forget that, man. I'll be at like the jiu-jitsu gym, and we'll be like wrapping up, like getting changed or whatever, and just like getting ready to leave, and a couple of the guys, they'll bring their kids in like for open mat and stuff like that. Some of their, my daughter takes classes there, and some of their boys take classes there. So on open mats, they'll bring them in, and they'll just kind of roughhouse with each other as the old men are beating each other up. And we'll be talking about whatever as people are getting ready to leave, and you forget that there's little kids around, and someone like drops an F-bomb, and you can see like the little like 10-year-old like grinning from ear to ear. Like, he's like, I know I'm not allowed to say that word, but it was kind of cool that I heard it.
And that's how kids learn to swear.
It's like context, right? They get it. You know what I mean? They'll be like, oh, so I can drop this whenever, I drop a tool when I'm helping dad on the car or whatever the case is. But how you been, man? It's been a while since we got to catch up, man. What's going on with you? How you been?
I tell you what, life is good, but life is full bore, pedal to the metal. It's nonstop. But it's good, man.
Nice. That's awesome. I've been kind of living vicariously a little bit through your stories and stuff, watching you get down and dirty with the kids on the mat, watching your kids on the mat, doing some grappling, dude. So I knew that you were into wrestling. Like this is even before you and I like knew each other officially, because I saw like when a Instagram post or story or something like that way back in the day. And this might even been like very early Nine Finger Chronicle days, like when you and Mark were still doing the show together and stuff. Like it might have been like that long ago. I saw you, do something like, well, I think you went to like a meet or something like that. And I was like, oh, no shit. I was like, he's into wrestling. And I didn't know that. Did you wrestle growing up?
So I wrestled 6th, 7th, 8th, and part of 9th grade.
Okay.
And here's the funny story. You look at me and you go, that guy looks, if you were to say, is that guy a wrestler or is that guy a basketball player? You would say that guy's definitely a wrestler.
Yes.
No way he's a basketball player.
Yeah.
But all of my friends, my friend group, all of my friends were basketball players. So I thought I should be a basketball player. And so in 9th grade, it's basically, when I was in high school, you had to choose. Right? It's because the practices were at the same time. The meets were, different nights away and whatnot. And so I pretty much had to choose. And so I choose to be with my friends. And it is one thing that I really regret not doing because I really felt like I really did have fun wrestling. Yeah. And I learned a lot of things about, you can learn a lot of things about yourself through wrestling that you may not learn through a sport like basketball.
Yeah, man, that is, no truer words have ever been spoken. I started, I think, whenever I was like, 7th grade. And it was really my dad, all my cousins wrestled and stuff like that. And my dad put me in it because he and my mom split up and all this stuff. And like, I was 12 years old, 13 years old, and you're just angry because you don't understand, And so he's like, all right, well, let's go ahead and focus some of this anger and energy. Let's get you on a wrestling mat. And so that's really kind of how I started. And, I wrestled all the way up through high school. I actually didn't go out my senior year, which is like to your point, like it was the one regret that I had is that I didn't go out my senior year because I had maybe some very slim opportunities to go wrestle like after that potentially.
Yeah.
Because during the off season stuff, I would go to, freestyle tournaments and stuff like that, during the, I guess the spring and summer months essentially. Go to open tournaments and stuff like that. And I absolutely loved it. The part that I couldn't hack anymore, though, was cutting weight.
Yeah.
Because I cut a good bit of weight. Like I would cut anywhere, 20 plus pounds a year usually.
Yeah.
And it just was, it was hard. And like, when you're a kid, and this was back in the day, dude, we're going to date ourselves here. Like, we didn't have nutrition science back in the day.
Oh, no. No, it was rubber suits and hot rooms.
Rubber suits, hot rooms, and don't eat. Like that. Yeah. That was the diet. Yeah. You know what I mean?
The worst possible advice. So I got to prepare for this really strenuous activity. I need to be in top shape. How do I get there?
Right.
You're going to not eat, and you're going to just run until you're dehydrated.
Yeah. Could you imagine getting ready to go, do a gnarly Western hunt, and your preparation was, I'm just going to starve myself and not drink any water.
Yeah, and just deplete your body of all nutrients.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, what they know now today, like to manage weight and strength and all that stuff is just, well, even now they have rules in place where these kids can't cut any more than I don't know exactly what it is, but they can't cut any more than 10 pounds or something like that. They have to weigh in before the season, and then they're only allowed to drop so much weight, during the course of the season based on their preseason weigh-in.
Yeah, and so now kids are maintaining certain weights throughout the whole year.
Yeah.
Instead of, doing the big cuts so that they can get down to a weight and then drop down even further if they need to. So they're starting the process of cutting weight well before the season even starts.
Yeah. Yeah. And as long as you do it in a healthy way, I remember the worst one for me was, because I always fluctuated, man. I finally, I guess my junior year, I got it down to where I kept my weight pretty close all year long,
Yeah.
And I was really kind of dedicated. And but the year before, we left for Christmas break, and I came back, and we had a match. Like right after Christmas break, we had a match 3 days after we came back from Christmas or whatever. And we all had to weigh in before practice, and coach would make you go around the room and say where your weight's at, And he wasn't asking you what you weigh; he wanted your plus or minus, how much are you over, how much you under, whatever the case is. Everyone's going around the room. We got a match in 3 days, and he gets to me. He's like, Campbell. I'm like, 16. He's like, under? I'm like, no. Man, I lost 16 pounds in 3 days. That was brutal.
Oh man,
that was the worst.
I was at a wrestling tournament once, and there was this guy who took diuretics.
Oh man,
to make himself shit before to make weight, and so he went out there and he made weight and he wrestled, but he got put in an upper body lock, and he shit his pants on the mat.
Yes.
And then the guy backed up, but he didn't stop. He wrestled and he pinned the guy with a dirty butt. Dude. And the whole crowd was like, "What?"
Yeah. Oh my god, dude. I can honestly say I've never taken any like diuretics or anything like that to make weight. Now there was a kid who had a similar story on my team the one year, did the same thing. And a kid shot in for a takedown, like first period, and straight shit himself on the takedown. Like tried to sprawl and just like lost it. And he ended up forfeiting the match because there was like a no doubter. Like it wasn't like people didn't know. It was like visibly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was he'd done the deed.
Yep.
So that was all she wrote for him on that one. But yeah, man, teaches you great life lessons. And I mean, I'm even getting great life lessons now, like, doing jujitsu at 44 years old. You know what I mean? Yeah. Just like going in there and just trying to do hard things every day. And it's humbling. That's for sure. Like wrestling is just grappling in general is one of those things. It's a very humbling sport, Yeah. There's always someone badder than you. There's, that's the one thing like with BJJ's, like you walk in, like there's a guy, he's new to our gym and I was rolling with him the other day. Super good dude. I don't really know like where he's at. I know he's more advanced than me and we were kind of talking afterwards. He's been doing it a long time, but I probably outweigh the guy by, I don't know, Dan, probably like 30 pounds easy. You know what I mean? Yeah. And he straight up armbarred me. Like, you know what I mean? Like you look at him, you'd be like, I could throw that guy around and just like kick my ass for 6 minutes, Yeah. So it's not the size, it's the technique, which is the great equalizer. But so it looks like your kids are some savages on the mat though, dude. I was watching your IG story just even today, and you had, I don't know if they were in a tournament or what, but it looked like they all were faring pretty well. The youngest one, dude, had me laughing because that kid he was wrestling, like getting tossed around, just like the biggest shit-eating grin on his face the whole time. I was like, man, I love that. I was like, that is awesome because they're just loving it. You know what I mean? Like they're being active and just wrestling like boys should.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, okay, so here's how it started. At the beginning of this year, wrestling became a point of interest, and so my daughter went out, my son went out, and both my boys went out, right? And so they started. My daughter went to 2, I guess you would call it trial classes. And so the trial classes happened, and then she's like, well, I just don't want to do it anymore. I'm like, okay, trial classes. But if, because I said, if you start it and I pay for it, you're going through the whole year, or the whole session, and then you can quit afterwards. Okay, so she said, I want to do dance. So my 2 boys said they wanted to stick with it. And so they started wrestling. And then we got a wrestling mat in our basement. And then my daughter was like, hey, I want to wrestle you. And to my oldest boy's like, bring it. And so they wrestled. And my daughter was, she outweighs him by 12 pounds. She's 3 years older than him or whatever, 2 years older than him. And so now she's like, if I can beat him, I'm sure there's other people I could beat.
Right.
And so now she wants to go out now. Right. And so she started up this past week. And this is the tough part about getting kids into wrestling, because if there's this balance, it's not like there's no other sport I feel like you're walking a razor's edge where you could burn a kid out than wrestling. Yeah. And I don't know if I made a mistake or I didn't read into this tournament enough, but on Sunday we had 2 tournaments. My boy was going to be in the morning one. That was competitive. There was places. If you got pinned, you lost. And then in the afternoon, there was they call it developmental tournaments, where if you get pinned, you keep wrestling for the whole match, right? Just to get kids mat time. Yep. And so my son goes to this tournament, and they make you check these boxes: beginner, average, experienced, like elite. Those are the categories. And so I put beginner because my boy's only been wrestling for 4 months. And so the tournament said that they were going to try to bracket these kids accordingly to match up with similar. Well, they didn't. and he got put into a bracket with kids that have like 4 years of experience on them. Their records were like 20-5, 20-2. So 30 seconds into the first two match, over, he got thrown right on his back and visibly upset.
Right.
He's frustrated. And so because we've had him at these developmental tournaments, and he'll work the kids pretty well. Right. He's aggressive, but aggressive only goes so far until you meet someone with technique.
Yeah.
You can only bull rush someone, but if you bull rush someone with technique, you're going to end up seeing the ceiling.
Yeah.
And so 3 times he got pinned in the tournament. He finished dead last in his bracket, no wins. And then he was really discouraged. Luckily, we had this developmental tournament coming up in the afternoon, and so we ended up getting him in the I kind of sweet talked him into it, and he's like, okay, yeah, I'll do it. And then I'm so thankful that he did that so he could end on a good note, because he was able to wrestle kids a little bit closer to him. He got some wins, he got some pins, and so he ended on a good note. But it was one of those oh shit moments where I'm just like, oh man, I hope I didn't just like ruin everything.
Right,
Yeah.
something that he's really has enjoyed, you know what I mean, up to that point. Yeah, because it's hard when they're that young, like, you're 100% right, man. You're kind of walking a razor's edge of kind of making sure that they kind of get the I guess the principles and the lessons that the sport teaches. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so that's a good part. Like, because losing isn't bad, right? Like, even when we talk about hunting, like failing's part of it, right? Like, there's value in that, like throughout your life of being able to accept those things and move on. But when they're that young and they can't contextualize, like the value of it, they just see like win and fail or win and loss, right? And that's how they frame things. And so you're so right. And I think even when you get kids into hunting at a young age, you kind of walk that razor's edge too, man, because they think, or they want to at least, go out and see animals like every time you go out. You know what I mean? And sometimes when you go out, like, you just don't see any. You know what I mean? And it's hard for them to understand, like, that's fun and that's okay, because the animals is like the prize that they see at the end of the rainbow, not the things as you get older that you start to look at and go, man, it was the time and having a peaceful time in a tree by myself, listening to the wind blow, listening to the birds, like all the things you take for granted. They don't, they're just not developed enough yet to kind of grasp those things. And so it's hard for a parent in those types of environments to, like, how do you bring them along to where you get the lessons and the values out of it, but keep you engaged and show you the fun stuff or the exciting stuff often enough to where you still want to do it,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So what's the plan going forward? Any more tournaments or anything on the horizon?
Oh yeah, we're gonna try to get him in as many of these developmental tournaments as possible. We got one this weekend. My son bumped up to a new wrestling room. He's not in the beginner anymore. He's in the intermediate class now. Hopefully he can wrestle some more kids his age and size. We got the developmental tournaments that's going to help my daughter and my youngest boy. Like my 5-year-old, this is just something to do.
Right.
There's absolutely zero expectations with him. My daughter, she's all about wanting to wrestle in these competitive ones, but I went to a high school wrestling mat, our meet this last Thursday, and in Iowa, the big thing now is, dude, all these high schools are getting girls wrestling teams, and I mean they're bigger. I mean, there's more girls on the girls wrestling team in this high school that we go to than the boys team.
Wow.
And so there are some bad girls, man. I mean that in the most like dangerous badass girls.
Right, just like tough
rappers.
Girls. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh man. Yeah. They are good. And so my daughter saw this and she wants to do that now. And she's like really fired up about it. And I felt really good about what happened at this developmental tournament because she's really aggressive, and I think she probably made one of these boys not ever want to wrestle again. She was like putting the forearm on the back of the head, trying to force the half Nelson and really work him over, and just like making him eat mat, and then like the mat returns, like picking the heel and pushing him back down.
I love it.
And this kid was just giving up.
Yeah.
And then she got happy after that. And then she wrestled another kid a little taller than her and more of her height and weight. And it was a pretty even match, but she walked out pissed and she was fired up and like, she's got it. Yeah. Right. She's got that attitude that you need to have in a sport like this. And, I'm really looking forward to seeing how, my oldest boy comes out of this weekend and my daughter, as far as, wanting to get her in maybe a real tournament by the end of this year.
Nice. Yeah, I know, like, even Iowa, like Hawkeyes, the college team, like, they've even put a focus on, I know that they've actually, I'm pretty sure, have given scholarships out to a couple different girls this past, like, year. To put on the team.
Yeah, the University of Iowa is going to have a women's wrestling team next year that's official. Yeah. They've already hired the head coach, so it's legit, man.
That's awesome. And they did a great job, like, this past Olympic cycle. Like, I watched probably more female freestyle wrestling in the Olympics than I probably have ever watched in my life, Yeah. They've just done a really good job of kind of taking, what the men were doing and using – because they've had like some names now. Finally, this like past cycle where I won't say they're a household, right? Because it's still wrestling, it's still a niche sport, but as household as you could get with like a Gable Steveson and with like a Kyle Snyder and David Taylor, like that were on, and Kyle Dake, like guys who actually medaled, and who wrestled at big college programs that people would know and follow from college to Olympics. Like they did a good job of keeping that stuff connected to help, I think, kind of put some shine on what the female team was doing, because they got some savages on the female team, like just straight savages. And like some of those matches, man, it's just like a lot of sports, man. Like, and I was just gonna say, like your daughter wrestling some of those boys, like, I mean, we all know girls typically are smarter than boys, certainly when they're younger, and so she'll probably pick up technique really quick, like just because of her ability to like understand, comprehend, because they just develop more quickly. And so I'd be interested to just see how much cleaner her technique gets maybe than like the boys her own age.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, that, and I think a kid at her age can understand leverage more than my boy. Like she understood that if she wants to work that half, she's got to get on the opposite side and or on the same side and drive it. And my boy's trying to still be riding them and put the half in and turn them. So they start to, it clicks a little bit faster the older you get.
Right. So now the big question is, when's the old man getting on the mat?
Yeah, right. Dude, I am so broken. It's not even funny. Like, so I'm sitting outside of the practice. So right before the kids go in to the wrestling room, the high schoolers are getting done. And so the high school coach comes out and he sees me sitting in a chair, and he stops, he looks at me and he goes, "Hey, do you want a good workout?" And I go, "Why? It depends." He goes, "You want to come roll with our heavyweight? We need some more guys for him to roll with." And I just go, "Dude, my ego wants to say yes so badly to get out there, but I'm one hip toss away from never walking again. You know what I mean? Like my knee would just explode, or I'd be in traction for a month, and then it just like, so I had to check my ego and be like, just don't do it, because I don't need another knee surgery at my age.
Right. Yeah. It's funny, dude. When I first started taking jiu-jitsu, I would come home and my wife would be like, "How is it?" And I'm like, "I just left the gym 5 minutes ago," and I'm like, "I'm already sore." Like, it's like the soreness usually doesn't happen until like maybe the next day or like an hour later, a couple hours later when you start moving. But it was like literally the soreness would set in. And the first couple of weeks were brutal. Like I felt after every live rolling session, I felt like the next day like I was in a mild car accident. It's like completely. Now it's gotten better now. Like I've gotten used to it, but yeah, man, sometimes you gotta take that old guy rest day off. I certainly do that where I'm like, today isn't the day. I got up this morning, my hip was clicking, my knee was weird. But so we have a huge meet coming up, dude. We've got a Penn State and Iowa match coming up for in the Big Ten duels. And I don't know, maybe you and I should be making a wager on that.
So I've seen Penn State wrestle. And I've seen Iowa wrestle this year. And although Iowa is ranked number 2, like, I would be stupid. Like, if this was a football or a basketball game, you could say, oh, there's a prayer that Iowa could win or whatever. But I think that I don't think it's going to be pretty for Iowa.
Nah.
I think Penn State's going to walk away with it and fairly easily.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be a couple really good matches. I mean, Spencer Lee will mop the 125 pounder up. Cassiope and Dean wrestling. Cassiope and Curve Cleat wrestling again will be a good match, and then Warner and Dean will be a good match.
Except Warner's already lost twice this year, 3 times this year.
Well, Dean lost twice already too. He lost the Beard from Lehigh, and then he lost I forget who the other kid was, but the kid was ranked like 13th at the time or something like that. He's lost 2 suspect matches too.
Well, Lee got put on his back against Purdue.
Oh, did he really?
Times. Yeah,
I didn't see that.
He came back from like 8 to 1 and pinned the guy.
Yeah, he's a savage, man. That kid.
Yeah,
he's just a brute. But anyway, we'll pivot now to deer hunting, man. I had to get a little grappling talk in with someone who digs the grappling, man. But how's things been, man, with your season, dude? I know. So I was trying to remember the last time we talked because I knew there were some things that was up in the air. Like obviously you were hunting Iowa this year, and I know you killed a deer, killed a good buck in Iowa. But you went to Nebraska, and then you also went to South Dakota, right?
Right. Kicked it off with a Nebraska hunt in September, and then in October it was I don't even know, it's like the 3rd week in October I went to South Dakota, and then Iowa was really just a 4-day event on a new farm that I got access to. So I really didn't hunt a ton in Iowa this year. I went in December for a 4-day late season hunt right before I had to go do after Christmas, before New Year's. Did 4 days in 4 hunts there and got close, but then had a dog issue. And other than that, man, the season to me just went by so fast that it didn't even exist almost.
Yeah, it was a funky season for me too, man. I was just talking to a buddy of mine about that. I was like, I felt like this year, and I don't know why, I just felt all kinds of out of sorts. And I was like, and I don't know if because this year I went to Idaho and did an elk hunt. And I was like, and I don't know if it's because I cut my time short on every other hunt that I was doing after Idaho because I took time to go out there. But I was like, I just kind of felt, one, that it just kind of whizzed by, and 2, I just felt like I was a day late and $1 short on everything that I was doing.
Yeah.
But how was Nebraska overall? How was that trip?
Hot.
Yeah.
It was hot. I started off on pretty much some public that I knew about, or that I learned about. Went to Nebraska, spent 3 nights in this one. There was 3 properties. I camped in the middle one, and then would drive north to one and south to the other. And I covered them, and there was very little deer on this property. It was hot. I mean, the first day and a half before a cold front eventually came through, it was 95. It was like 85, and I'm sitting in the back. I'm laying in the back of my truck trying to fall asleep.
Oh, it's the worst.
In the bed, and I brought a 0 degree sleeping bag, and so I'm just laying on top of it, and
it's
I'm
still
sweating.
Sweating.
Sweating my balls off, and it's 11 o'clock at night, and so I ran into some mule deer, and then I said, dude, I got to go someplace else. And then I drove from Iowa to my first spot was like 8 hours. And then I traveled, I hunted 2.5, 3 days there. Then it rained one morning. So I said, hey, I'm just going to get in the car and finish driving all the way to northwest Nebraska, and hunted a whole bunch of different properties up there, and really I saw one good whitetail, and just like 4 corn mule deers, and really that's all I saw. And it was one of those hunts where the conditions made me lose interest in it real fast.
Yeah.
And I decided, I'm gonna stay here. I'm gonna hunt it out. But there was nothing that really caught my attention and made me go, oh, I want to go chase that. You know what I mean? Right. So I'm gonna walk. I don't really want to walk 2 miles for a 4-corn type of deal.
In 90-degree heat.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so let me ask you this. This is something that I had contemplated and had to think about. So I had a guy who lived in Nebraska, and he had a farm that he said, "Hey, dude, you come and you can hunt my farm like it's yours. You do whatever you want." He started sending me pictures of mule deer, bigger mule deer than I had seen in any Nebraska public.
Right.
And he's like, "Dude, come." And I said, "Dude, I really appreciate this, but I'm gonna go give this public a try." And so I said to myself, I'm gonna skip on the private. I'm gonna try to grind it out on public and give it a shot. But the more I think about it, these experiences are so limited in life, especially at my age. Like who knows how much longer I'm going to be able to go do this.
Right.
That I'm starting to reconsider my approach and not necessarily have to grind as hard, especially if someone's offering you an experience that's not going to cost anything. And so I was contemplating like, thank you very much, but I don't want to come on your property. I really appreciate it, but I'm going to give this. And the whole time I'm thinking, this guy's sending me cell cam pics of the mule deer that are on his property right now, and that I could go and potentially hunt.
Right.
But here I am just grinding it out.
Right.
So I was trying to do it the hard way, and with a different opportunity right in front of me. So I don't know. I really hadn't finished that thought. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, you and I are very similar in that way. It's like once I set my sights on like a type of experience or a certain goal, like I'm hard pressed to want to come off of it. You know what I mean? Like in that moment, it's like maybe next year, like I would think about like, yeah, I could go hunt that farm next year if the offer still stands. That would be an opportunity, right? And that's a lot of the times I think probably similar to you, to where it's like I've set my goal, I've set my sight. It's going to be miserable. I don't want to think to myself that I cut bait because it is miserable. You know what I mean? But at the same time, like again, I think we're similar in this way that as I'm getting older, I'm looking at it going, by whatever means necessary, as long as I'm having the experience that I want to have, how it looks can change. Yeah. You know what I mean? And that's okay. Because I think you hit a certain point where, and I think we've both been there for a while. It's like, I don't give a shit what other people think. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't care what people on the gram think of whatever I kill or I don't kill or whatever the case is. I'm going to do whatever I want to do. And everyone can be good with it or not, but I'm not going to lose any sleep over it, you know? Cause I've been thinking a lot about that recently too. Grinding it out here in PA, crazy pressure, even just in my home state, you know what I mean? Where it's the hunting's can be tough. And I started kind of thinking about, as you get older, you think about like investments, right? Like, well, what could I invest in, right? Like when you start to think about it, and I was like, well, land is always a good opportunity to invest in land. And so then I started thinking about like, well, where would I invest, in land? I was like, well, I'd like to be able to use it. And so I looked at like maybe a cabin or, just like thinking about like, oh, maybe the family could use it. And then I was like, you know what? Maybe I buy a small farm in a state that I'd really like to hunt, and maybe that's part of what I do every year. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so I started thinking about that, and it was along the same lines where I was like, look, I still dig hunting the public land. I still dig traveling, and I've talked to Chad Sylvester about this too. I was like, but as I'm getting older, I was like, man, it'd be nice to have like one gimme hunt, not even a gimme hunt, but one like controlled environment, so to speak. You know what I mean? Because it's like everything I hunt around here is super pressured. I go to Kansas, great hunts in Kansas, but there was pressure there. I was running into people while I was there. When I come to Iowa, it's like I've everyone thinks Iowa has zero people running around. That's not true. There's people there that like to hunt. You know what I mean? So it's like I've seen people when I've been there on the public in Missouri or Ohio or whatever. I was like, I would like to just be able to know that like if I want to go get away and don't want to be bothered, that I could go somewhere and hunt for like 3 or 4 days and know that I'm not going to see somebody. Yeah. It's just that little peace of mind. And so I don't know if it's like as you get older, you just kind of, you want a certain type of experience where you start to try to figure out, well, how do I get that? And I think what you look for ultimately starts to change over time too.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely, man. I it's one of these things where I've caught myself so many times when I do my own podcast saying something and then 5 years later being in a different completely space, whether that's financial or experience level, and saying, because I'll use this as an example. I used to be that guy who was like, Jesus Christ, who can even afford an e-bike?
Right.
Like, I can't afford an e-bike, and now I can afford an e-bike. And, so
Right.
so here I am, I bought it.
The e-bike looks pretty nice, dude.
Yeah, especially when, it saves you some legs and saves your legs, on certain issues and the access benefits of it. And so, I've realized that one thing about me that is true to my bone is I'm a hypocrite.
Oh yeah, we all are, man. Anybody who says that they're not is completely full of shit. That's my opinion. And it's not that you intend to be. You know what I mean? It's just that, again, things that you thought when you were 30, you may not still think when you are 40. You know what I mean? And things you think when you were 20, you probably don't think when you were 30. You know what I mean? So it's just, things change over time. Priorities change. The things that are vying for your time change. The amount of time that you have changes. You know what I mean? Things that you value change. And so to me, it's like I never hold those things against somebody, when they want to make, decisions to do X, Y, or Z. You know what I mean? Because it's like, man, you do you. If it makes you happy, man, I am happy for you.
Absolutely.
And it's kind of, so you went to South Dakota then in the middle of October, right?
Right.
And so was it, I'm assuming that was a little better, especially related to the weather.
Yeah, it was awesome. And then I got bit by a dog.
Oh, are you kidding me? Oh, wait, I saw that. I remember that. Yeah. Oh my God.
I pulled into a piece of public, right? And I am.
I'm sorry, man. I don't mean to laugh. But
no, it's good. It's hilarious. I unpack. And I'm getting set up for a camp, and then I see this guy in a truck, and he is about ready to drive straight through the public. And I said, "Is this road drivable?" And he goes, "I don't know, but everybody does it." And so I think it is. And so so he drives all the way back there. Meanwhile, I'm on my e-bike, driving. I could have driven 2 more miles back and parked my truck and set up camp instead. Anyway, so he has an older vehicle, and it's roll up windows that you have to use your hand. They're crank, right? And so he tells me to open his door so he can talk to me. So I open his door, and there's a dog in the front seat, a pheasant dog. He tells me, I'm going to go in here and do some pheasant hunting. I'm like, okay, cool. And I do what I do to every dog. I put the back of my hand up on its nose to let him smell me, and the SOB just bites the crap out of me instantly. Oh, and I'm like, what? And so the only words after that this guy said to me as I'm sitting there dripping blood is, hey, you need a tissue? Like, I think he was afraid I was going to kick his dog like a long ways, or I was going to turn him in, or and so he got real nervous and he wanted to get out of there real quick. So eventually, the whole first 2 days of hunting were me with this wound that I had to care for from my mobile first aid kit. And then eventually I got talked into going to the emergency room, which was 1 hour drive from the piece of public that I was on to get not rabies shots, but tetanus shot and whatever the other pills are, like antibacterial type
some like antibiotics or something like that.
And antibiotics. Yeah. So yeah, and so I had to do that, and so that was the first 2 days of that hunt, and then really I kind of found myself. I went into a place, and my goal is to hunt mule deer, and so I was focused on the mule deer, and then long story short, man, I saw some whitetails. I chased whitetails for a day and a half, and then I was on a really good whitetail. I watched him walk in, and I watched him bed, and I said to myself, dude, I know where this deer is at. I could go and just sit on the edge of this marsh and this cattail grow and this I guess prairie grass, and I could just sit there and wait till he pops up, and he's going to walk out the same trail. I just know it with this wind direction. And I said to myself, dude, you're here to hunt mule deer, right? And so I changed my mind again, And so then I left that bedded buck, and I went and started trying to hunt mule deer in a different piece of public, and I ran into some good deer, and I am in no way, shape, or form a mule deer expert or anything like that. So I do what everybody probably does. You get up high, glass them, and then as soon as you find them, you try to get in closer, wait for them to bed, or watch them go into a crevice where you lose them, and then try to pick apart the terrain. And so I did that pretty much for the rest of the trip, and just I could not locate the deer that I would see in the morning. They were so good at getting into the spots where I couldn't find them, and I could see them in the morning when they're on their feet. And then by the time they started, they headed into the cracks to bed. And so then the next morning or the next couple days, I would try to get closer in the dark, get up high closer to them to try to get a different angle of where they're coming in. And then, of course, they're gone and they go somewhere else.
Right.
And so I see them further down the valley, and it's, you're just chasing them and chasing them and chasing them. And it just was like, and then the trip was up.
Yeah. It can be maddening, man, when you're hunting on the ground like that, because even in Kansas, you presume that things are flat for the most part. There's big drainages and stuff out there as well. And you'll see deer, and I've never in my life watched deer vanish into thin air before in front of me. You know what I mean? Like, except whenever I'm in those plain states like that, where it's like, oh, there's some deer. And then you're like, they just poof, they're gone. And you're like, and if you go and you walk where they're at, there might be like a 3 foot like undulation in the terrain where they're 3 foot lower and you can't see them over top the grass, and they're just hiding in there, and then they're going to pop out 300 yards away that you have no clue that that's where they're at now. And it just makes it so hard.
Yeah, there's so many times that I would walk down. I'd walk somewhere, and then I would look behind me, and there's four does just looking right at me. Like I walked 100 yards, and I didn't see this just a little cut. Mm-hmm. That you're looking in one direction, it's not even there. You look back, and it's there, and they're looking right at you.
Yeah,
and then they do the bounce.
Yep, they do the bounce, and they're gone. Man, the other thing was too is like I don't know. I saw a lot of deer while I was in Kansas this year, but I don't know if you've had this experience, like whether it's in Nebraska or South Dakota or whatever, but like, I have a hard time figuring out like where they're going to come from. Like, so many times I've walked into an area that I was covered up with deer before I even got to where I wanted to be. Like, or I was bumping deer on the way in, and I'm like, oh, there shouldn't be any deer here. They should be coming from here. Or they should be coming from here. And I want to get to here. So this seems like the best access route because I shouldn't be bothering anything. And then on my way in, it's like I see 5 deer. You know what I mean? Like that happened to me so many times in Kansas this year, particularly, where no matter how I was accessing things, I just always seemed to be where the deer wanted to be before shooting light or as it was getting light, where I didn't have an opportunity or whatever the case was. Do you kind of find something similar to that when you're hunting like those kind of open terrain kind of areas?
Man, I wish I could sit here and give you some kind of specific, but I'm still so lost when it comes to that I don't even know really what to say.
Right. What do you think it is? Like, what do you think? And the reason why I ask this is because like you and I are both, novices at that like open terrain type of hunting. Like, because I'm just curious if we feel the same way or if we feel differently, but what do you think it is that you need to get better at to I don't want to say successful hunts, but to have better hunts in those types of setups?
So here's what I'll say is I will compare it to hunting from a tree stand or hunting from a tree. If you see deer movement and you're in a tree stand, let's say 2 days in a row, the third day you're going to move your tree stand and you're going to go over to where the movement was, and you're going to attack. So it's this balance of being patient and then being aggressive and making a move. And so I've figured it out in the whitetail woods, but I have not figured out that when to be aggressive, when to slow down and be ultra patient. Like you hear these guys about mule deer hunting talk about, yeah, dude, I sat over top of them for 6.5, 8 hours. And, instead of putting a stalk, I just waited and waited and waited and maybe waited for the wind to shift or waited for one thing or another. And I would get in these. And so for me, when it comes to the mule deer, I feel like there's times where I've waited myself out of an opportunity, and then several times when I've been way too aggressive and went into a drainage without necessarily locating him, and then I look up and he's already standing up looking right at me. Right. And so it's just trying to find that balance and going through enough of those experiences to where I can say, okay, here's what with these conditions I need to wait, or with these conditions I need to attack. Right. And so I haven't found that yet.
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head, man, because I was thinking along the same lines. Like, one for me is a very fundamental kind of like mechanical thing where I screwed myself up on a really good deer in Kansas because I didn't draw my bow back whenever I set up on that ground setup to make sure I could draw clean, and my arrow caught a sapling in front of me and bounced off my rest, and he heard it, and he was at 18 yards, and he bolted out of there. So that was just a stupid mistake from a guy who doesn't hunt on the ground a whole lot except when he's in Kansas. You know what I mean? Like, but the other part of what you were saying is 100%, because I found myself in that situation, 2 different times this year of when do I thought I knew what the deer were doing, and the second day I laid back and wasn't aggressive enough, and then I hammered deer from about 150 yards away with two does, cutting 2 does out, 20 yards from where I was planning to be, and it was like, damn it. So then I played it better, later in the hunt, and was getting to the same spot, and me and that deer showed up at the same spot at the same time in the dark, on the last day of the hunt, and I just couldn't get. I had nothing between he and I had no cover. I was pretty much hung out to dry. He's snort wheezing at me. He thinks I'm another buck. So there's another buck not far away from us. And it was just one of those things where it's like, I don't know, did I pick the wrong side of the drainage? Should I have been on the other? You know what I mean? Like, you just go through your mind to like, what could I have done differently on this that would have had a different outcome? Should I set up further north and up top? But it's, to your point, it's just experience, like doing it enough times, screwing it up enough times. Eventually you figure it out. Yeah,
for sure. And I'm still figuring it out.
Yeah. Me too. Kansas tag still in my pocket.
Yep. I think I'm gonna be hunting Kansas this year.
Oh, nice.
As well.
We'll have to talk after this offline. I want to hear where you're going, because if we've been to the same spot, I can give you some at least what I know.
My goal is to not hunt public. I'll be honest with you. Right here. Yeah. My goal is, so my uncle.
Oh, you told me about this, I think, the last time we talked.
Yeah, my uncle. So he moved from Iowa to Kansas for a job, and he instantly starts shooting booners every year. I mean, just crazy. He shot a 211 during a rifle season. So he's in an area and has access to some farms that are really, really good. Right. And so my goal is to put, hi, I'm little nephew, hey, could you help me out? Right. Little nephew. And so, because he was actually one of the guys who, he used to take me pheasant hunting, he used to take me trapping, he used to, we used to go seine for minnows, and so he had some kind of role in the foundation of me being in, liking the outdoors. Right. And so like, he took me turkey hunting. I got my first turkey with him, first pheasant with him. And so I hope he invites me into the farm. He's already mentioned it a little bit, right? That some of the farms that he has access to, and if that's the case, then I don't think I'll need to hunt any public, but right. I may have some spots for backup. Nice. Well, if in the off chance he tells you to piss off, let me know, and I'll share with you what I know, at least from the area. But man, so then Iowa, you basically were just in Iowa for November then, right? Right. Yep. I don't even know. Oh, I did go to that main farm in October before my South Dakota hunt for like 3 days. Dude, I feel bad about even talking to people about this, because you've heard of Pike County, Illinois.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
It's like the mecca of big, like back in the day, big.
Yeah,
big
90s,
mecca.
it was like the place you wanted to be.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so now in southern Iowa, there's 3 counties that are just the counties that you want to be in. Mm-hmm. And so I got a farm in one of them, and it's for free, and it's permission, and I'm the only person who hunts it, period.
That's awesome.
And so it just a long story short, a listener of the Nine Finger Chronicles messaged me when he heard that I lost this local farm. He said, "Hey man, I know it's going to be a ways away from you, but would you be willing to drive? And if so, I can get you in contact with the owner." Long story short, 100 years this family has owned this property. Wow. And the guy doesn't want to sell it, and he's an out of state. He doesn't hunt, and he's an out of state owner.
Right.
And so I'm just like, bingo. And so I go and check it out, and I scouted the property, and I was like, there doesn't look to be that much deer sign here. But I put some cell cams out, and instantly it was like shooter, 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 wow. shooter, shooter. And it was stupid how many good deer, big deer I saw October like 6th, 7th, and 8th when I was there.
Wow.
It was crazy, dude. I saw 4 shooters. It was nuts.
Why do you think like they're there but you didn't see any sign?
I don't know. Like I walked a lot of the property. I didn't see very many rubs. I didn't see any old scrapes. It was like I wasn't fired up when I left that spot.
Right.
But once I got in there, it is the most secluded patch of timber. Imagine, those coins. How do I put this? Those coin funnels where you'll drop a quarter and it slides down and it just goes long all the way around in a circle, and all of a sudden it goes real fast. That is what this farm is. And so everything drops down into this block of timber. And it's just a sanctuary because nobody is allowed to go in there.
That's crazy.
And all the pressure from around it gets pushed down here, and that's where all the deer are at.
Wow.
And all the deer, like it is. I feel even guilty talking about it because of the content that I put out. You talk about strategy. Right. Dude, I walked in there, I hung like 4 tree stands, or there's 3 or 4 tree stands. And on the second day, like the first day, I miss this 8-pointer who I'm glad I didn't kill because he's a 3-year-old. Right. But the next day, the next day it rained all day. The next morning it rained. No. Yeah, it was a complete washout for 3 hunts. And then I went in there the next morning I went in there the morning. How did I do this? Oh, I went in the afternoon. So It rained in the morning. I hunted the afternoon, didn't see anything. Came back the next morning, still sprinkling, and sure enough, the number 1 buck on that farm that I wanted to shoot shows up, and I kill him. And so, I mean, it's like, hey, let's break down this hunt. Like, there's nothing to break down. I showed up and I shot a deer. Like, it was. I mean, I put myself in a good terrain feature where there was a lot of, it was just stuff that from hunting a lot.
Right. When you walk into a place, if you don't know anything else, you go like, hey, this, if nothing else, should be like the good starting spot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it was nuts, dude. It was crazy. I mean, I didn't even need to rattle.
Are you serious?
I didn't even need to rattle. There were so many bucks that would cruise by, and I just hit them with the brap, and they would just turn around. And right now, there's some guy in Pennsylvania or Michigan going, "You son of a bitch." I hate you. And I swear to God, it's not this easy. It is definitely not this easy to hunt in Iowa, but I got lucky with this farm, dude.
That's crazy, man. So how many good bucks did you actually see from the tree? First, let me ask you this. How many days did you hunt in Iowa on that farm?
On that farm?
Yeah.
So the 3 in early October, and then I was there for 4 days in November.
4 days in November. Okay. And so out of those 4 days, were they both like morning and evening sits, or it was like one morning? Like how many sits do you think you had in those 7 days?
Yeah. In those 4 days that I was there, I had a morning hunt because I went back to a tree stand I hung in October, left, hung up a tree stand that night, hunted, missed that 8-pointer, rain delay. That morning, that morning I went to actually while it was raining, I drove out to the farm and I set up another tree stand in the rain, cracking thundering lightning. And which, dude, like I've done a lot of dumb stuff, but that could have been the dumbest. and so I set that stand up, waited for it to stop raining, went out that night, had an encounter with a couple of deer, and then the next morning it was buck showed up, like, and then I shot him.
Right. So you had 4 sits there. How about October? It was just 3 evening sits?
Three. It was maybe it was a day. It was a hunt or it was a afternoon hunt, a morning hunt, an afternoon hunt, and then I left. So it was actually 2 days.
All right. So you had 7 sits. Let's say. Yeah. So in 7 sits on that farm, how many shooters did you see from the tree? Am I going to want to drive to Iowa and like
poach,
slap you or something?
Oh, dude. I mean, so in October, I'm walking into the farm for the very first time, and I'm e-scouting tells me I need to be in this spot. I walk right to it. I jump up a booner.
Jeez.
Like, and I never saw that deer again. I have him on trail camera, but I never saw him again after that. Set up a stand. That night of hunting, I saw that 8-pointer that at the time I thought was a shooter, and 2 other bucks through some trees that I couldn't see, and another big 8-pointer, which those that were far away, I couldn't really tell if they were shooters or not. Right. Now, through trail camera data, I can tell you that there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 deer that I would consider shooters, and they're 4-year-old or older. And so that 8-pointer that I saw didn't count. And the biggest antlered deer on the farm was a 3-year-old.
Wow.
That I saw during the late season. If I had a muzzle loader, I probably would have had a shot at him. But I'm glad he didn't. I'm glad I didn't, because he has the potential of being an absolute giant.
Right.
11-pointer next year.
Dang.
So, but after that, I'm saying 5 deer on that were regular customers on that farm, 4.5 years or older.
Damn.
Well, and the biggest bully buck was 120-inch, probably 6-year-old, 7-year-old. I mean, just this gigantic body. And even late season, he walked into this cornfield on a neighboring property, and he beat the shit out of a 4-year-old. I mean, a bigger antlered deer.
Are you serious?
Beat the crap out of him. I watched it. It was the first time I've ever seen a fight that hard in December, late December.
Wow. That's crazy, man. Like dude, you got a little gem spot there, dude.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
And so I'm very thankful to the landowner and for letting me hunt, and for the guy who listens to the podcast and put me in touch with this guy. Like, very thankful for them. It's given me an opportunity to hunt like a farm that you only see on TV.
Right. That's crazy.
It's crazy, man. It's crazy.
So you shot that buck on that, whatever sit that was, but it was not. So the hunt, it sounds like you were like, man, this is, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like one of the smoothest, shall we say, like hunts,
one of them
of getting an arrow in a deer, but like what kind of took place after was not so smooth, right?
No, dude, it sucked, honestly. So here's the shot. I'm just going to kind of back. The deer shows up. I knock an arrow, or the arrow's already knocked, and my release wasn't clipped. I don't know. It didn't click. And so when I went to draw back, my arrow just went bloop right out of my bow.
Oh.
And it landed 5 feet in front of the buck. And he looked at it, and then he looked at the tree, and he looked up at me, and he looked back down at the arrow, and he kind of took some backward steps and started peeling off. And so I'm in this process. I'm trying to be as still as possible while nocking another arrow. He's now broadside, 20 yards-ish. I finally get everything hooked up, clicked in. I draw back, and I didn't want to stop him because I thought I was going to spook him. If I went back, and after that all happened, I thought he was going to run. And so I let one go as he's like taking a step, and I hit him back, right? Okay. And so long story short, I hit liver and guts, and there wasn't a ton of blood right away. Like there was good blood right away, but then it kind of dried up real quick. And this is the abbreviated version, man. So I called a dog. I called a dog to come and track.
And and at this point in the season, you're not a big fan of dogs. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, no, like the other German Shepherd that ruined my late season hunt.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I hate my family dog, but that's a different story.
And you got bit by a dog.
And I got bit by a dog. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, yeah. I'm not a dog guy. Anyway,
you had quite a dog season, man.
Right, exactly. And so the dog comes in, starts sniffing around, finds a different dead buck.
Are you serious?
And so, I'm just like, dude, there's no way I shot this. And the guy's like, well, the dog came right to it, right from where, you shot the deer. He kind of sniffed around, and this is where he came to. And I'm just like, no way I shot this buck. No way. So I was getting ready to put my tag on this buck, and then it popped in my head, do an autopsy. Look for a wound. And so I'm peeling back. I cut back his fur, and there's no puncture wounds on this deer. So he's just dead. He's half eaten by coyotes. And so we searched a couple more hours, couldn't find anything. And then I left the farm. I went to go grab something to eat, and went to a buddy's house that I know that lives down there. Talked to him for a while, and then I went back out, and luckily I'm eating my last bite of an apple, and I just crossed this creek, and I stopped to throw it, and I look down, and I see the smallest little speck of blood on a leaf. And so I did the imaginary line thing where impact to this, and I draw a straight line, and then I follow that out, and I see this little gap in this fence on the opposite side of the property, and I said, I'm going to walk right there, and right before this fence crossing, there he was.
Are you serious?
Laying dead. Yep, laying dead, half eaten by coyotes.
Jeez.
And he was, it was, I don't know. I was standing, earlier that day, I was standing 20 feet from him when I took a trail camera down.
Oh, wow.
He was just behind a big tuft of grass. And so the dog came by him, and what happened was I think the dog found that dead buck, and it just ruined his tracking because he knew where this deer was at. He already got rewarded for it, and then he had to,
Yeah.
And so
that's crazy, man. How? So when you shot him till you found him, how long was that?
That was.
I was watching your stories like during that whole thing, like as you were kind of going through it.
I'm gonna guess from the time I shot that buck to probably close to 30 hours.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. And
I was not able to get the meat off him because the coyotes had destroyed him.
Yeah, that stinks, man. Like freaking coyotes, man. They just
It's
you let anything lay for any amount of time, you're always running the risk at that point, man. It's like that's one of my, well, I say fear is a little strong of a word, but related to deer hunting, that's like one of my biggest fears is like arrowing something and then like, not being able to locate it in time before, whatever happens to get to it or whatever. But damn, dude. Well, I'm glad you actually found the right buck. Did you ever figure out what happened to the other one? Like, did it just?
I don't know if he got
injured and like coyotes just tracked him down or something,
or he got run down by coyotes, or maybe he got hit by a car and made it that far and then died. But he died in a creek, so I don't know how he got got there.
Right.
So, I've never seen a deer just go die in a place like that.
Right.
Usually they're up, tucked in somewhere, and this was just weird that he was there. No wounds on him.
Right.
And so, I don't know.
Yeah.
It could have been from fighting. It could have been maybe he got locked up. Maybe the sickness got him or something, but that was a first for me.
Damn, man. Well, I'm glad you got your buck, and then you had a dog incident in late season. So I'm always curious, man. When the season kind of wraps up, is there ever a sense of relief of like, man, the marathon's over, at least for the moment?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
so tomorrow's the last day of the Iowa hunting season.
Okay.
I think there might be another like late season antlerless that a guy could take part in, but for me it's over.
Right.
And so, I'm just frustrated that like I always want to fill the freezer. I always want to go chase a big buck.
Yep.
But I always talk myself out of shooting a doe early because for some reason I'm always in buck killing mode. And then I killed my buck. I didn't get the meat off him. And so now I was like, so I went back there and I had multiple tags in my pocket. And of course, I let does walk to try to fill my late season buck tag.
Right.
And so, I'm just shooting myself in the foot. Luckily, I have a ton of meat from earlier that I can still use. And so, I don't know. I don't know. I wanted to get out there and get the job done on a doe or one of those other bucks for late season. It didn't work out, but yes, I am now glad that for the most part the season is over and I can quit worrying about certain things and get back to work, really.
Yeah. No, I hear you there, man. It's always a little bittersweet. I'm always ready for like the break of like, all right, I can just like have my weekends back, and go do some other things that I want to do and, be a normal human for a little while. But then, I've already started kind of like looking at my gear going, all right, what do I want to change for this year? Like it's like I already picked up a couple things that I want to kind of change. And so it's like, it's a never ending cycle, right? It's like, then I get into like the gear tweaking mode and start thinking about next year and getting excited. And if you hunt out West, it's like you're already buying tags and buying points at this point.
Right. Right. Getting close anyway.
Yeah, exactly. What, man, I have like one more thing that I wanted to kind of talk to you about. There were actually two things, but I'm always curious, man, if I was watching your post like recently where you're kind of like showing some deer that you've passed in the past, right? That you've let walk. And I thought that was kind of interesting. And so as I was looking at that, and I saw like a recent post you put up today, I was like, I want to talk to Dan about what regrets does he have? I just put a note down. I was like, regrets. I've had a few. It's like like the song, right?
Yeah.
I was like, what are the bucks specifically that stick out in your mind that you regret passing, and why do you regret it now and that you passed it, earlier in your life?
Well, I went through a period where I had the luxury, being where I live and having access to the farms that I had access to. I had the luxury of chasing some really big deer right away in my bow hunting career. And so I don't even know how to say it. I was lucky that I had the opportunity to hunt these deer. But while I was hunting these big deer, I was skipping these stair-step moments that I believe every bow hunter should really go through. And I never went through a Brownets down phase. I never went through shoot some fork horns or some 120s. I went right away into the big leagues.
Right.
And as I'm trying to play in the big leagues and learning how big deer operate, I was missing a whole bunch of opportunity at some deer that were really good and that I'd probably shoot today.
Right.
So, for example, I passed a 110 or 160 inch 10-pointer one year as I'm waiting for this buck I call Shipwreck, who was like a 190.
I remember the story of that deer. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, in this 4-year period where I'm chasing 4 or 5 year period where I'm chasing this giant buck and some other giant deer, I'm passing some really good 140 to mid 150 class deer, including that 160 10, where I was just like, I look back at that and I go, dude, you should have been laying those down because I wasn't filling tags.
Right.
You know, I was just waiting for the big buck to show up, and I had blinders on, and I was only focused on the antlers, and I was only focused on this one buck, and really what it did is that buck taught me a lot about how big deer operate, but in the meantime, the moment of truth, I was missing that part.
Right.
Right. I was missing the at full draw with a deer in front of you. You know, I was shooting some does. I was still shooting does, but I was so focused on these bigger caliber, older age class deer that I feel like I skipped a step. And on some of those years, like on some of that footage that I showed on, like 2000, I'm trying to think here. 2007, I tagged out, did not in 8, I did in 9, 10, 11, 8 my tag, 12 tagged out, 13, 14, and 15 did not tag a deer. And so in this period of time, I'm just passing stupid deer, and I should have shot them, and it would have made me better, I feel, than where I'm at today. It would have put me ahead of the curve.
Right. What do you think you missed at that moment of truth of like executing the shot? Like what part of that do you think, you know, cause you know, I know like, I know that you say this, I know like in talking to Tony, you know, that he says it's like, you know, time behind string, you know, letting that string go as often as you can, you know, just, it helps, you know, does no matter what. But, you know, I will say this, like there's a different feeling when that target buck shows up versus that doe you decide to kill that day. You know what I mean? Because I'll walk into a hunt going like, oh yeah, if I see a doe today, I'm going to kill it. You know what I mean? And it's like, and I don't, as long as it's a mature doe, I'm not going to, you know, I'm not going to not going to shoot something smallish or whatever. I'm going to try to find like a good mature doe to take out. But there's that feeling of getting, you can go through the mechanics. Like the mechanics are the same of like figuring out when you're going to draw. And a lot of times, sometimes those old mother does can be harder to kind of fool, you know what I mean, than a buck that's all stupid during the rut. But I'm able to keep my stuff together a lot better whenever there's a doe in front of me versus when that deer that buck I've been trying to find finally shows up. It's just a different feeling. Like, what do you think that you've missed in drawing back the string on more of your kind of like list bucks because you were waiting on the one?
Yeah, just exactly what that was. That moment of truth, right? So the target deer steps out. I have very little experience at this point, even shooting anything with antlers, and so I blacked out. I got buck fever, and I feel like it, especially from 2006 to 2015, it affected me, right? And so 2016 comes, I start to figure out how deer move, and then I start, getting in. So I kill a deer, great. 17, kill a deer. Okay, I'm starting to figure this out. 18, kill a deer. All right, moment of truth is starting to get easier. And so now, if I didn't skip that period of time where I should have been shooting deer, I feel like there would have been some encounters in the late 2000 teens, mid to late 2000 teens, where I would have been able to capitalize on true giants.
Right.
And I did not. And so shooting more deer would lead to more comfortable during the moment of truth, and leads to killing more deer.
Right.
And the deer that you actually want.
Right. Man, last question for you, dude.
Yeah.
And I know I'll get a good response from you. This is why I was thinking, I was like, I always like to ask people like one kind of like out of the blue, hard to answer question. And I really wanted to ask you because I know I'll get a really good answer. So
Shoot.
If you could change one thing about the hunting space, the hunting industry, just in general, what would it be?
Man.
I like the little chuckle there.
This is where it gets real crazy, dude. Like, I have this bad vibe about hunting.
Okay.
And I see it. I see it every single year, and being and this makes me sound like a douchebag, but being in the industry, making my living from selling advertising and seeing how the inside works, it's becoming, especially, and this is one thing I've learned since coming down to that farm in Iowa, the outfitting, the sales, the leasing, the really focusing on the gigantic antlers, and ultimately that's going to lead not just in Iowa, but being able to take money, throw it at a problem, and say, oh, hey, I want to shoot big deer. Come shoot big deer here, and you can take money and you can fix the problem and you can go shoot big deer.
Right.
And ultimately, I just see everything turning into in certain states, even like Iowa. Like I used to be able to knock on doors and find permission. Now it's leased, it's outfitted, and as all the other ground gets leased and outfitted, more permission gets granted to those who do let it, and so it's basically a piece of public.
Right.
And so what I've witnessed is that this big buck craze is leading this for profit. We're whoring out the natural resource that is the whitetail, and we are trying to make a profit off of it. And I'm guilty of it too by doing what I do, but it's leading to a pay-to-play system, and eventually, like the majority is going to be left with the scraps. And this is just a vibe that I'm getting. And I know there would be a lot of people out there that will argue it, but in states like Kansas and Iowa, where, man, we have less than 2% public ground.
Yeah.
So if some of these spots go away, and they will for me eventually, then I either have to own, I have to lease, or I have to outfit, go through an outfitter to hunt my own state.
Right.
And so it just becomes like the water is so muddy, and I don't like it.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't disagree with you, man. Like I would say, I don't know if that's the thing that would have first come to mind for me to change. But I also live in a different state, right? So it's a little different circumstances here. But I don't disagree with you. I just know from me, like personally for me traveling, having done that for, years, that I see way more people now, right? In like these different places that I used to go where I used to not see people, just generally speaking, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think popularity of hunting, increasing, is good. I think that if more people are interested, I don't think that that's a bad thing necessarily, but I do think that there's a tipping point. You know what I mean? To a certain degree, where more isn't necessarily always better. Necessarily, right? And I think a lot of times we just look at things and we're like, well, we need more people, right? It's like, oh, okay, but
I don't like the R3. Like, I really don't like how the R3 set up. They're like, well, we need more people in hunting so we have a bigger voice. No, I don't necessarily agree with that. I feel like the voice is already here. We just need to speak up. We have enough people who are hunting. And I'm not saying, like, I don't want to be like hey, do not come to be a hunter, because that's not the case. If you want to hunt, I feel dude, welcome, come join us. But I don't feel like we need to be having some kind of like, hey, we need to start recruiting more hunters to fill this space, blah blah blah, whatever their reasoning is. There are a lot of hunters. Those hunters need to be educated on how to speak up and where to speak up about things.
It's like a lot of things in life in general. It's quality, not quantity. You know what I mean? It's like if you have quality people, who are willing to go, speak their mind, do, and be a participant and whatever, then, you don't need as nearly as many people. I've also kind of along similar lines, I had a little different feeling on it. I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I don't think it's entirely bad, but I feel like they might be taking and I don't know enough about it to speak like on the ins and outs of it, but it very much feels like a sledgehammer approach to something that maybe should be using a scalpel.
Absolutely.
And I say that because I'm like, when you think about places where you want to recruit, like you do hit a point of diminishing returns, right? And I'm not saying I'm pro or con of this argument, but some of the argument that I've heard in the past is that like, hey, there's more hunters now in certain areas, and like, there's more people on the public lands, and the hunting's worse. And that may or may not be true. But what is true is that if people are having less than ideal experiences in places because it's overcrowded, those people you're trying to get in are ultimately going to leave, and you're probably going to force other people out who weren't intending to leave as well. Right. You know what I mean? Like, so that's the unintended consequence of it. And so when I say a scalpel, not a sledgehammer, it's like, where do you have the most, public lands that are being underutilized? Those would be the places where I would think about, trying to recruit. In places like PA, it's like we have the biggest hunting numbers like in the country. It's like, do you really need to recruit PA more? You know what I mean? Like that would be, maybe we do, I don't know, but that, or like Michigan or like Texas, what are some of those states that do have public land opportunities that just don't have the hunter turnout? You know what I mean? It's like, that's maybe the places that I would start, and have more of like that type of strategy. But yeah, I think like with anything else, you could always find lots of things to fix. But I like yours. I do agree that I think it's trickling into a rich man's game.
Yeah.
To a degree, especially big deer. Yeah. Big deer is certainly turning into a rich man's game.
Yeah, for sure.
For
sure. Well, hey man, I tell you what, I actually, we started off talking about grappling, but I have to leave right now to go to kids wrestling practice.
Awesome. So, I want to let you get out of here because
this interview has to be over.
Yeah, nice. Before you go, dude, let people know where they can find Nine Fingers, where they can find Sportsman's Nation, all the stuff you got going on.
Yeah. Name change.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Empire.
Sportsman's Empire.
Sportsmansempire.com. Nine Finger Chronicles. Just type it in wherever you want to listen to podcasts or Google it. You'll find it, and give it a listen, man.
Awesome, Brad. Hey man, I appreciate you coming on, dude. I'll talk to you soon, buddy.
Yeah, take care, man. I really appreciate this.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank all of you for listening. And if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast. And hell, while you're at it, head over to YouTube and give us a sub there as well. I'd be super appreciative if you do those couple things for me. Before I shut this thing down, I need to give a big shout out to our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible. Spartan Forge, Tethered, Exodus Outdoor Gear, and Genesee Beer. And until next time, we'll see y'all.